last one we did was football. We might have even done American football more recently, I can't remember. But tonight we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about the history of Formula 1. I'm a relatively new fan to Formula 1. Well, I say new, I've really probably gotten into it over the last 4 or 5 years, really. And while I don't watch every race, I do keep up to date with it and watch highlights, etc, etc. But tonight I thought it would be a fun video to have some images up on screen, as we often do with these videos, and talk about the history. It wasn't long ago we did a facts video about Formula 1, and you guys seemed really keen to have this video, so here it is. Before we get into it, and before you get too sleepy or relaxed, I have one question for you. Who is your favourite current team? And who is your favourite current driver? My two favourite drivers really for me are Lando Norris, but really my number one is Tsunoda. I always want Yuki to do well. I just love how erratic he is, and I feel really that he's destined to race for a top team in the future once he sort of grows up a little bit out of his sort of erratic nature, but that is what makes him such an entertaining driver. But yeah, let me know who's your favourite team and who is your favourite current driver. But that being said, let's get into the history of Formula 1. So first we're going to take a look at early motor racing. Motor racing started to take shape in France around 1884, quickly evolving from simple races from one village to another to sophisticated events. So let's take a look at what Formula 1 was like before the creation of the FIA World Championship. In 1900, an event that proved crucial in the racing world was held by the American publisher James Gordon Bennett Jr. Bennett was the archetype of the gregarious media mogul, the Elon Musk of his day, if you will, and his reputation for extravagant behaviour is said to be the inspiration for the phrase of incredulity. Gordon Bennett. As the owner of the New York Herald and the Herald Tribune, he did much to further the cause of sport in America, staging the first polo and tennis matches in his home country. But it was with his creation of an international motor race in Europe that would shape the future of a brand new field, motorsports. Named the Gordon Bennett Cup, of course, the annual race attracted competitors from around the world, with each country able to register up to 3 cars. According to accounts of the events, the races were quite casually organised, but still did enough to popularise motor racing in the UK and Europe. Following the example of Bennett, millionaire William Kissam Vanderbilt II launched the Vanderbilt Cup in the United States, specifically in Long Island, New York in 1904. Influenced by these competitions, Louis Chevrolet, a Swiss man who worked for a French builder, decided to move to the US. In 1901 he became the leading figure in American races and designed the vehicles of General Motors that bore his name. So that brings us into the first Grand Prix. In 1906, the first race that bore the name Grand Prix was organised by the Automobile Club of France and ran for 2 days in the month of June. The circuit, located in Le Mans, had a total length of around 65 miles with 32 participants, representing 12 different automakers. Bavarian Ferenc Schiz won the race in his Renault after 783 miles. Each country organised their own events without a formal championship to link them together, with the rules varying depending on the country. All competing vehicles had 2 people on board, a driver and a mechanic. Rules stated that nobody was allowed to work on or repair the car except for them. A key factor for the success of Renault was the use of detachable wheels, which allowed them to be changed without having to dismantle the car. So, the first racing circuits. In the early days, races were not held on purpose-built tracks. Instead, public roads were temporarily closed, and long circuits were mapped out on them. This was the origin of the Grand Prix of Le Mans in 1906, as well as Italy's Tassafiore, which ran along 93 miles of Sicilian roads, the 75-mile German circuit Kaiserpreis, and the 47-mile French circuit Dieppe, which was used in the Grand Prix of 1907. The exceptions were the circuits of Brooklands in England, completed in 1907, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, first used in 1909, and the Autodromo Nazionale Monza in Italy, which opened in 1922. That same year at Monza, Italy became the second country to host a race using the name Grand Prix. The name quickly spread to Belgium and Spain in 1924, and later to the other countries. However, it was not a formal championship, but a variety of races that were held under different rules. And that brings us into Formula Libre. Just before World War I, various Grand Prix started sharing some rules, mainly engine sizes and weight. In 1924, the Association Internationale des Automobiles Club Reconnus, or the AIACR, formed, whose mission was to unofficially regulate Grand Prix racing. However, these regulations were abandoned in 1928 in an era known as Formula Libre, when the organisers decided to run with virtually no limitations. From 1927 to 1934, the number of races that ranked as a Grand Prix grew, jumping from 5 events in 1927 to 18 in 1934. So, that brings us into first moves to a standardised World Championship. The first World Championship was held in 1925, consisting of only 4 races: the Indianapolis 500, the Grand Prix of Europe, France and Italy. It was only a manufacturer's championship with no driver's title. 10 years later, and thanks to the agreement of several federations, the European Drivers' Championship took place annually until the start of World War II. The 1933 Monaco Grand Prix was the first time in the history of the sport that the start order was decided by qualifying times. All competing vehicles were painted with their national colours, although in 1934 the Germans stopped painting their cars in an effort to save weight. The metallic colour, of course, is still used on Mercedes' silver arrows in Formula 1 today. Not as much. Supported by the German government, who participated in the financing of the 2 manufacturers, Auto Union and Mercedes-Benz dominated the period between 1934 and 1939, with the 2 Bavarian teams winning all but 3 races in 6 seasons. And that leads us nicely into the creation of Formula One. Immediately after the Second World War, there were only 4 races in the Grand Prix category. The rules for the World Championship were already established, but it wasn't until 1947 that the old AIACR was reorganized and renamed the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile, or the FIA. At the end of the 1949 season, it was announced that races in 1950 would unite. This was in order to create a Grand Prix World Championship for Formula One drivers. A scoring system was established and 7 races were deemed suitable to be included. The first race of the World Championship was held on May 13th, 1950 at Silverstone in the UK. The early World Championship races were dominated by Italian manufacturers and drivers. The first world champion was Giuseppe Farina, driving an Alfa Romeo. Ferrari's appearance in the second race at Monaco, and in every season since, means they have the distinction of being the only manufacturer who has competed throughout the history of the sport. So, moving into Formula One on the way to modernity. From the beginnings of the Premier class to the current Formula One season, the racing series has developed significantly. As the sport has evolved, technical developments in aerodynamics, car design, engines, and better safety measures have all advanced at speed. Back in 1966, F1 racing cars received a significant increase in performance. The racing cars in the Premier class were equipped with around 220 horsepower at the time. This meant that in terms of sheer power, they were often inferior to other motorsport cars and even to some production vehicles. Doubling the cubic capacity resulted in a significant increase in performance. In order to be able to tame this extra power, Formula One introduced mandatory spoilers and wings in the 1968 season. These were intended to improve downforce and traction, and to increase safety at high speeds. This led to some innovative engineering solutions. The legendary Matra MS-10 from 1968, for example, relied on a construction of particularly high front and rear wings. This unique design brought F1 legend Jackie Stewart 3 Grand Prix victories in the 1968 season. However, due to a number of accidents, the design was banned by the FIA in the following season. The governing body moved to establish the design of Formula One cars with a configuration of a front and rear wing that is still common today. Next up, we have the ground effects era of Formula One. At the end of the 1970s and beginning of the 80s, there was another technical revolution in Formula One. After Mario Andretti's World Championship victory in the Lotus 79, the so-called ground effect racing cars dominated events. Here, for the first time, side boxes with an inverted wing profile and movable side skirts were used, which further increased the downforce of the racing car and resulted in significantly higher cornering speeds. This resulted in some of the craziest design ideas Formula One has seen to date. The legendary Brabham BT46B, including the fan installed at the rear, earned the inglorious title US, the racing car gave Niki Lauda victory in the race at Anderstorp, Sweden in 1978, with a lead of almost 34 seconds over Arrows driver Riccardo Patrese. Shortly thereafter, the car was declared illegal. In the 76-77 seasons, the Tyrrell team even used a six-wheeled F1 racing car, the P34, which had 4 front tyres in addition to 2 massive rear wheels. Tyrrell. I can't remember the pronunciation of that. So jumping forward to this final section, and then we're gonna take a look at some of the records throughout history. Formula 1 2014 to present. The 2014 season marked one of the most disruptive rule books the sport has ever seen. The Premier class finally said goodbye to the 2.4 litre V8 engines that were used before. A new type of energy recovery system was added to the V6 turbo engines with a displacement of 1.6 litres, which replaced the previous KERS system. In addition to the kinetic energy recovery, another system also uses the waste heat from the engine via the turbocharger to generate energy. Combined with this, the ERS is limited to 120 kilowatts of power, which is available to the driver for 33 seconds on each lap. In 2014, it was still 60 kilowatts of power for a maximum of 6.7 seconds per lap. The 2014 season also marked the first of an incredible 7 successive drivers' titles, 6 for Lewis Hamilton, 1 for Nico Rosberg, and 8 consecutive Constructors' Championships for Mercedes. From the 2017 season onwards, further changes came into force that were intended to make the vehicles more spectacular and significantly faster. Formula 1 racing cars became wider, while front and rear wings and the diffuser could be significantly larger. At the same time, the tyre width at the front and rear was noticeably increased in order to improve the mechanical grip of the vehicles. As the result of an accident in 2014, a roll bar was introduced for the 2018 Formula 1 World Championship to protect the drivers from head injuries. The protective ring is known as the halo. Okay, so we're now going to take a little look at some of the records in Formula 1, and this was updated literally, I think, today, to account for Max Verstappen winning this year's Drivers' Championship, I believe. I could be wrong. So, most Drivers' World Championships. Upon winning the 2024 season, Max Verstappen breaks into the top 4, going level with Sebastian Vettel and Alain Prost. Lewis Hamilton remains atop the record table alongside Michael Schumacher with 7 titles apiece. The German was dominant at the turn of the century, winning 5 titles on the bounce with Ferrari. These were in addition to his double world championships with Benetton in the 90s. It was a record that looked unassailable. However, Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes' dominance in the hybrid era turned the motorsport world on its head. Hamilton replaced Schumacher and Mercedes after the German's retirement at the end of 2012. Since then, Hamilton won 6 world titles between 2014 and 2020. Those 6 titles, along with his maiden championship in his second season with McLaren, make him the joint most successful driver ever. Juan Manuel Fangio's record of 5 titles in the 1950s stood the test of time. The first great driver of the Formula 1 era, he finished first or second in the championship in the first 7 seasons he entered. His record stood until 2003, when Schumacher clinched his sixth title. Alan Prost's battles with Nigel Mansell, Ayrton Senna and Nelson Piquet earned him 4 titles, as did Sebastian Vettel's absolute dominance with Red Bull in the early 2010s. Most Constructors' World Championships now. As the longest serving team in Formula One, it's no surprise to see Ferrari sitting atop the Constructors' Championship table with 16 championships. Omnipresent in Formula One since its first season in 1950, the Scuderia has become a symbol of the sport. But it's one thing to turn up to every race, it's another to win them. For decades, the Scarlet Red Ferrari has been at the top of the grid, and it has won the Constructors 16 times, along with producing the Drivers' Champion on 15 occasions. Its world champions include Alberto Ascari, Juan Manuel Fangio, Mike Hawthorne, Phil Hill, Niki Lauda, Michael Schumacher, and most recently Kimi Räikkönen. There's a gulf between first and second in this list. Williams has been present in Formula One since 1977 and took its 9 titles throughout the 80s and 90s. Keke Rosberg, Alan Prost and Damon Hill are among some of its driver champions. McLaren's then won the Constructors' title on 8 occasions, but produced the Drivers' Champion 12 times, including Lewis Hamilton. He also tied up 6 of Mercedes' 7 titles, with teammate and rival Nico Rosberg taking the other. So that's Ferrari top with 16, Williams in second with 9, McLaren and Mercedes tied for third with 8 championships, and then next is Lotus with 7. We now look at most Grand Prix victories for a driver. When he first stepped into a Formula One car, the paddock knew this guy was special. But when Lewis Hamilton took his first victory in Canada in 2007, no one expected what would follow. Lewis Hamilton stormed to a record 104 victories. The Red Bull's Flying Dutchman may have stemmed the flow of victories, but Hamilton has demonstrated in 2024 that he still has what it takes to reach the top step. Max Verstappen's record-breaking season in 2023 knocked Ayrton Senna off the 5th and Alan Prost off 4th. And in the last race of the season, Sebastian Vettel off 3rd. Not a bad season for the 26-year-old driver. Schumacher's 91 wins came mostly with Ferrari, including a near-perfect year in 2002. He took 11 victories, 5 second-place finishes and a single 3rd place. Sebastian Vettel's record with Red Bull and his title pushes with Ferrari earned him the 4th spot. So you have Lewis Hamilton sitting at the top with 105 wins, Michael Schumacher in second with 91 wins. Next is Verstappen with 62, Vettel with 53 and Alan Prost with 51. Guess the question is, will Max Verstappen overtake Hamilton's record? I personally think he will. I'm really not sure whether Hamilton should have gone to Ferrari or not, but you never know. He's gonna look good in red, let's be real. And then to do Hamilton's horn even more, we have most pole positions, with Hamilton again topping this. Lewis Hamilton is the first driver to reach triple-digit pole positions. He secured his 100th pole position at the Spanish Grand Prix in 2021. So he sits top of this table with 104 pole positions. His nearest rival is Michael Schumacher, but with 68, it doesn't come close to the British driver's total. Ayrton Senna is in third with 65, Vettel with 57, and Max Max Verstappen with 40. And then finally we have most Grand Prix victories, but from a constructor's point of view. As you might expect, the teams with the most championships also make up the teams with the most victories. Ferrari remains way out in front with 248 wins, and is the only constructor to take more than 200 race victories. However, the last few years have seen Red Bull enjoy a period of absolute domination. The Austrian team broke the record for consecutive Formula One race victories, taking their tally to 15 in a row. The record was previously 11 and held by McLaren, which had stood since 1988. So completing the rest of that top 5 is McLaren in second with 188, Mercedes with 129, Red Bull with 121, and Williams with 114. And that, my friends, is going to do it. Was definitely more of a kind of brief overview of the history, but I do hope that you found it interesting and you learned something new. I've definitely enjoyed this season of F1 way more than the one prior. It's obviously been a bit closer. I do think Verstappen, deserves the win just, but really you have to say it's potentially a matter of time before McLaren have a driver win the drivers. And I'm not sure what Red Bull are going to do with Perez, because he seems to be the one that's almost sabotaging their chances at the constructors this year. It'd be kind of nice if McLaren could win it, but we'll see. But anyways guys, that is going to do it for tonight's video. I really hope you did enjoy it. If you did and you are able to, then please do give this video a like and subscribe if you are new to the channel. But until the next video, everybody,